Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome you all once again to photojournalism course. This course has a course code of GNC 422. This is lecture number 7 and today in this session we are going to discuss shutter speed in photography. I'm Anwar Khan, lecturer journalism in mass communication department, Cohort University of Science and Technology. So the discussion points for our today's session are that first of all we are going to discuss the very meaning of shutter in camera. I mean in this very slide we are going to discuss shutter in our daily life, that do we use the shutter in our daily life, and if yes then how can we use it and what are the examples. Then we will relate it with the camera, the meaning of the shutter or the association of the shutter with the camera. Then we are linking it with the camera. Then in the part 2 we are going to discuss about the very meaning of the shutter speed in photography, and surely shutter speed is different than the shutter, and then we are going to explain it in detail that what do we mean by shutter speed. Then we are going to discuss about the functions of the shutter speed. Surely that what we are studying, does it have any practical value in the field or in the life, do we use it practically or not. So we are going to explore all those dimensions of the shutter speed, and then lastly we are going to discuss the types of shutter speed. So these are the four discussion points that we are going to discuss in our today's session, and these are our learning objectives. Our students must be able to answer all these 4 points after attending and watching today's video. Meaning of shutter in camera, we say that shutter is one of the most important components in the camera, and there are other important components as well, like we have it in the form of the aperture, like in the form of the ISO or gain, like zoom ring, like wheel ring, like we have it in the form of the camera lens, camera body, and other important components. But shutter is one of the important components of the camera, and in today's discussion will reveal the whole of the phenomenon, that how shutter is a very important component of the camera. In general sense, if we want to define it, that do we have or do we use the very word shutter in our in general life, then yes, we say that the very word shutter is taken from the very word shut, which means to close something, like the gate of the shop or the gate of the room or the office, etc. And we know that the shopkeeper, when they come to open the shop, they pull up the shutter. That is again called shutter, because that is a door which closes something, which closes the shop, right? So shutter is in the form of the door. And this shutter, when we want to associate this shutter in camera, then what happens that this shutter in camera happens to be in the form of a door in between camera lens and film sensor. So we also have shutter in the camera, and remember that this shutter is in between the camera lens and the film sensor. It means that it separates the camera lens from the film sensor. See this very picture. This is the camera and this is the light, and this light is traveling through the camera lens. This is the lens of the camera, and when this light travels through the camera lens, it goes there, and this is basically the film sensor, where the images or the videos or the pictures they are created, because it has some chemical material on it, and images are created over here. But what happens that before reaching the film sensor, what happens that here is a door, this is the door, and this door stops the light from reaching to the film sensor. So if you want this light to reach to the film sensor and make the image or video, what we need to do is that this shutter has to be open until, right? And if this shutter is not open, the picture will not be made, right? So this shutter is I mean the same thing, that it is in between the film sensor, and it is in between the film sensor and the camera lens. And remember, right, that this shutter is in the body. I mean, if anyone asks you that where we can find or what is the location of the shutter, then we say that shutter is actually found in the body. It is not found in the camera lens, right? In the camera lens, we find the aperture, while shutter we find in the camera body. Now let's discuss shutter speed in photography, and let's differentiate between shutter speed and the shutter. So when we want to define shutter speed, that we can say that shutter speed is basically the speed at which the shutter opens and closes each time in the camera, allowing the light to fall upon the camera sensor, is called shutter speed. So we came to know that shutter speed is basically the speed at which this shutter or the door opens and closes, because when it opens it will allow the light to fall upon the film sensor, as we saw in the previous slide, and when the shutter is closed it will not allow the light to fall upon the film sensor. The images will not be made. So if we want the images to be made, right, so what we need is that we want this shutter to be open, because when it opens the light will fall upon the film sensor. Look at the second definition. Shutter speed is the length of time when the film or the digital sensor inside the camera is exposed to light. So very simple. I mean, the second definition is like the first definition. And we came to know that the image will be made when the shutter is open, the door is open. And it means the same thing, that it is actually the length of the time or the duration of the time when the shutter is open, right? The gate is open and the light falls upon the film sensor. Then at that time, what will happen, that the images will be made, and it is actually the duration of the time or the length of the time. Fine. And another very important question that normally we are asked by the students in the class, that shutter speed we have it in the still camera or in the video camera or in both. So the answer to this question is that shutter speed or shutter is found in the still camera as well as in the video camera. All the camera around the world, if we talk about the Hollywood, if we talk about the Lollywood, if we speak about the film industry of the China, France, Japan, everywhere you go, you will find this shutter speed, right? You will find this shutter, right? And this is where we differentiate it from the shutter. Shutter is actually the door, and the speed at which this shutter opens and closes is called shutter speed. So we also came to know about it, that shutter is found in still camera and in video camera, and throughout the world in all the cameras, whether it is I mean, very professional camera or professional camera or mediocre cameras. So in all the cameras you will find shutter, right? And then we say that the speed at which the shutter opens and closes varies. Another very important point, and very simple, that this speed which we came to know about, that the speed that we are talking about, the value or the number of the shutter speed, it varies. Sometimes it will be very slow or very low number, right? The shutter speed will be in low number, and sometimes you will find it in a high number. So we say that this shutter speed, the value of the shutter speed or the number of the shutter speed, it varies according to the quality of the camera. So let's discuss the measurement of the shutter speed, another very important aspect of the shutter speed. Um, we say that when we want to measure shutter speed, so we measure it in the form of the in fractions of a second or seconds, depending upon the quality of the camera, right? So what happens that usually, so we have in our everyday life we have kilogram, we have gram, we have meters, we have liters, right? But over here, if we want to measure shutter speed, then over here we cannot, or we do not have the, you can say that the kilogram or the gram or the liter or the meter, right? What we have over here, we measure the shutter speed in the form of the in fractions of the second. This is the LCD of the camera, and note, see over here that this one 1/500, it is basically the shutter speed. It means that one by 500 of a second. If you divide 1 second into 500 pieces, right? Keep in note it carefully, that if you divide 1 second into 500 pieces, then 1 second, then one piece of that very second, one piece of that very second, the shutter will open and close, because over here we have given the command of 1 by 500, right? And the shutter will open and close at this very speed. So this would be the speed at which the shutter will open and close, allowing the I mean this much of light. So you can decide and you can imagine that how much small fraction or duration of time or light that would be. Then we say that it is found, I mean this shutter speed is found in the numbers like 1 by 500, sorry, 1 by 100, 1 by 4,000, 1 by 12,000, and the number just goes on depending on the quality of the camera. And then we say that it can also be found in the numbers like 1 by 25th of a second, 1 by 10th of a second, 1 second, 2 second, 4 second, and the number goes on depending on the quality of the camera. So we can see that over here the number is I mean just increasing 100, 4,000, 12,000, and it means, remember that again, let me repeat it, that when you divide 1 second into 100 parts, into 100 pieces, and then what happens that the shutter will remain open I mean of that one piece or that one component or element of the 100. Similarly, if you divide 1 second into 4,000 pieces, and similarly when you divide 1 second into 12,000 parts, so the uh, shutter will open only for one part of the 12,000 parts, right? So it will be open for only and only one part. So you can imagine that how short duration that would be, right? Because and what is a remarkable speed of the shutter speed is that how fastly it opens and closes. Over here we see that this speed is decreasing, and when you divide 1 second into 25 parts, when you divide 1 second into 10 parts, and over here we have 1 second, 2 second, and 4 second. When you give this command to your camera, the shutter speed will remain open for 1 second, right? And when you give this command to your camera, it will remain open for 2 seconds, and when this one, it will remain open for 4 seconds, and after 4 seconds the camera the shutter will close. So you can imagine the amount of the light which will enter into the camera. It means that in this very sequence there will be more light will enter into the camera falling upon the film sensor as compared to this one. And that is the reason that the first one, I mean this sequence, we call it the fast shutter speed, because over here the speed is very high. And the second one, the second sequence, we say it slow shutter speed, because over here the speed of the shutter it is decreasing. Now, functions of the shutter speed. We say that shutter speed has two functions in the camera, and this is a universal function. Remember that it is not only for the photographers or the photojournalists. Throughout the world, anywhere you go, if you go to the Hollywood or if you go to the Lollywood or any of the film industry who is shooting drama, documentary, I mean, whatever they are shooting, right? It is used for these purposes. First of all, we have shutter speed for the creativity purposes, and then we have it as the light controlling agent. So it has these two purposes. Okay, then we have the we came to know about the fast shutter speed, and this is one of the type of the shutter speed that if we want to divide shutter speed, then we have the fast shutter speed and the slow shutter speed. The fast shutter speed, we came to know about it that it is over here the speed of the shutter is very high, and the fast shutter speed is represented by numbers higher than 1 by 60, right? So 1 by 60 is the normal shutter speed, and when you go above 1 by 60, like you have 1 by 100, 1 by 1000, 1 by 4000, 1 by 12,000, it means that it is the fast shutter speed, right? And what is the function of this fast shutter speed? That we came to know that it is one of the important components of the camera. So we say that we use fast shutter speed to freeze actions at a certain moment of time. This is very interesting, and we are going to explain it with examples, right? So just keep it in mind that the function of the fast shutter speed is to freeze the actions. We need it, right, in everyday life, in sports, in everyday life, we need to freeze some actions. We need to take image at a certain time of the at certain part of the time. When you divide the time, I mean, as we are talking about that, it is 1 second, and we are dividing this 1 second into 100 parts. Over here 1000 parts, over here 4000 parts, over here 12,000 parts. So when so what happened that we are trying to grab I mean that very action at that very particular part of the time, right? So fast shutter speed is used to freeze the action. Okay, let's have a look at this very example. Densten, a South African fast bowler, he is trying to catch the ball, right? He's trying to catch the ball. So he's in the air, and he is jumping for the ball. Remember that we came to know that the normal shutter speed is 1 by 60. So if we want to take this very picture with normal shutter speed, we will never ever be able to grab this very moment or this very part of the time, because it happens within the seconds. Remember that this jump or this catching of the ball, it happens in the within a second, right? So what we need, fast shutter speed to grab it, because without it we will not be able to grab this very picture or this very image, right, with the normal shutter speed. Other examples of the fast shutter speed, let's have this very example that the bird who is trying to catch the fish in the sea or in the water, and we can see the droplets, right? The water drops we can see, and this image again, so we cannot capture it with the normal shutter speed or with the slow shutter speed, right? We can only have this very picture with the fast shutter speed, because it freezes the action. It this fast shutter speed, it has frozen this very picture. Let's see another example. I mean, this is very ball which is rotating, and again, if we want to capture the movement of the ball, so it is with the help of the fast shutter speed that we can have it. Otherwise, we will not be able to have the fast. Other examples, let's have a look at these examples. I mean, again, all of them we are having movements. The central point, remember, of the for the shutter speed or the fast shutter speed is movement, fast movement. When something is moving very fast, like the trains, like the cricket ball, like football, like other sports, right? When something is moving fast, at that time we need to increase the shutter speed. It is very natural, right? We have seen the movies of the Tom Cruise, and I mean, if we are in sorry, Mission Impossible, where the Tom Cruise is running very fast. At that time, automatically the shutter speed is very high by the Hollywood cinematographers, right? So what happened that when you are trying to grab or capture the movements, you need to have the fast shutter speeds. Let's discuss the slow shutter speed and differentiate it from the fast shutter speed. The slow shutter speed is represented by numbers like 1 by 25th of second, 1 by 10th second, 1 second, 2 second, 4 second, and the number just continues depending upon the nature and quality of the camera. And remember that we came to know about the normal shutter speed, that 1 by 60 is the normal shutter speed. If you decrease the number, it will be considered as the slow shutter speed. If you increase the number like 1 by 100, 1 by 400, 1 by 1000, 4000, that would be considered as the fast shutter speed. And remember that the slow shutter speed is used for blurring the actions. To blur the actions, slow shutter speed is used, and remember that it is used intentionally by the photographers in the movie, in the movies, in the documentaries, in the dramas, etc. Right? So, what is the example? Look at the picture. The water is just flowing down, and it seems very blurry. And it seems that the viewers will say that this picture is not acceptable because it is very blurred. But what happens that the photographer has used the slow shutter speed, and it is one of the techniques of the creativity, and it is absolutely acceptable. What are other examples of the slow shutter speed? Look at these examples carefully. Look at this picture, the picture number one, where the train is blurred because it is moving very fast, and the photographer is using the slow shutter speed, and he is intentionally blurring the picture. And we might think that this picture is not acceptable because the characters over here, they are fine, they are in focus, while the train is blurred. So this picture is not acceptable, but it is absolutely acceptable picture because he is using the technique, one of the creative techniques of the slow shutter speed. Look at the second picture, in which it seems that these are the lights, fine, and again the photographer is using the slow shutter speed, and these are actually the cars which have moved from point A to point B, and the shutter was open for a specific period of time. For example, the shutter was open, we can say that for 2 seconds or for 3 seconds, and the amount of light that entered and fall and fill upon the film sensor in 2 seconds or 3 seconds. So what happened that all of them, they are making some lights of the lines of the light. And look at this one, this is a highway, and the cars are moving very fast, and what happens that it seems that all of them, they are just the lights, the lines of the light. And but what happened that the photographer is using the slow shutter speed, and it is absolutely one of the techniques of the creative photography. Other examples, look at this for example, where the character or the subject, he is moving the hand very fast, where and he has some lights, and he's moving the light, the hand very fast for 2 seconds and for 3 seconds. And what happened that the duration of the time, that much light will enter into the camera because the shutter was open for 2 seconds or for 3 seconds. And because this is one of the technique of the creative photography that we have it. Another important aspect of the shutter speed is that it acts as light control agent. It is controlling the amount of the light which is entering into the camera. Because when we speak about the journalism or the mass communication, so all of them, both of them, they deals with the proper amount of light that is visible and that is given to the audience. So for example, look at two pictures. The first picture, we call it as underexposed image in the language of journalism, while the second picture is called as the overexposed image in the language of the journalism. In the first picture, there is minimum amount of light, while in the second image, we have maximum amount of light. So what happens that such images cannot be printed, cannot be broadcasted in journalism or in mass communication. Yes, for the sake of argument, yes, I agree with you people that in horror movies, yes, I agree that we have very little light, we introduce darkness so that we can create the element of the fear into the minds and hearts of the audience. Well, this is something else. But in case of journalism and other genres of the mass communication, we cannot broadcast and print such images. We need to have proper images, and in that case what happens that the shutter speed comes and play its important role. Because what happens that if there is a minimum amount of light, if we are shooting at the evening time, what will happen that we will decrease the shutter speed to 140 or 130. I mean, we cannot decrease it more than that, because what will happen that we will have then blurry images again that would not be telecasted and printed. So by decreasing the number of the shutter speed, what will happen that maximum amount of light will enter into the camera. And if we are shooting in the daylight, for example 2 p.m 3 p.m in the hot summer days, what will happen that we have maximum light. So what we will do is that we will increase the number of the shutter speed. We will keep it at 1 by 200, 1 by 400, 1 by 500. What will happen that it will automatically decrease the amount of the light which enters into the camera. So shutter speed, another important aspect is that it controls the amount of the light which enters into the camera. Thank you. This is all in today's session, and let me repeat it again that what we have discussed in our today's session. First of all, we came to know about the meaning of the shutter, that we use it in the general life. then we came to know about the meaning of a shutter in associated with the camera or photography. Then we came to know about the shutter speed. Then we discussed the functions of the shutter speed, and then we discussed the types of the shutter speed, that we have fast shutter speed and slow shutter speed. And we also discussed the functions of the shutter speed, that we use shutter for creativity purposes and for controlling light which is entering into the camera. That's all in today's session, and thank you very much. See you in the next lecture. Till that, stay home, stay safe. Allah Hafiz.